So today I'm going to be talking about the implementation of classroom technology for visually impaired students. What visual impairment is that it's going to be vision loss that inhibits one's success at everyday tasks. I'm just going to be talking about the educational part of it for today. For a lot of these cases with students, visual impairment is going to be sort of synonymous with legally blind. There are definitely cases where it isn't, where their visual impairment just sort of refracts their eyesight. But for the definition of legally blind, you would have to have an eyesight of 20/200 at the minimum, which just means that at the absolute minimum, you can see from 20 feet away what someone with perfect vision can see from 200 feet away. There's also a little bit of an asterisk for this. It also counts in the field of vision for it. So if there's a student that has a 20-degree at most field of vision for the widest points, then they're also qualified in visual impairment. What this means is that it's just going to be they can't really see 20 degrees to the left or to the right. It would be if you had your hands on your eyes and then you just kept closing them in towards the center until eventually they're almost at 90-degree angles. That's what the student would be able to see. So the way that this is treated in the classroom, it can be diagnosed outside the classroom by professionals, and then they let the parents know that their kid has visual impairment. The parent lets the school know, and then the school would set up some services. For any sort of instance in class where it just happens, not really out of the blue, but it sort of is seen as this factor where it inhibits the student's success in the class, there are specially trained teachers that will determine just how heavy the impact is for the visual impairment on the child's ability to learn. And then there are also IEP teams that will bring in some services that will help the student learn. Some of the services include such as computer devices, braille, physical devices. For the computer devices, I just counted it in anything that is electronic. You can go back, you can go forward with it. Braille is pretty easy to understand for what it can be. And then physical devices, that's sort of just anything else that I found that can help the student just with any sort of reading that they have or anything that they need to see in the class. So for the computer devices, mostly it's going to be a lot of these computer programs that will help the students see a lot better for what's on the screen. So what it is that they have these few programs where it's going to be like a text-to-speech program. There are a lot of different ones where either you can just play the entire screen and it will just read off everything that's on the screen. There are ones where you can highlight what's on the screen and then they'll play that. There's a lot of different ones, but they all provide the same function of turning that text into a auditory form that the student can learn from. There's a text enlargement program that's out there where there's going to be two different screens, and the first screen is just going to be a regular computer screen. The second one's going to be a zoomed in version of that computer screen. So it's just going to be if you had the mouse but 300 times larger. That way it's a lot easier for someone to see it. There's also devices for text enlargement. So there's a new device where it's sort of just clipped onto the side of glasses. You can point out any sort of word that's close by it. The camera on the side of the glasses will notice what that word is, and then there's a little speaker to the side of it that will play it out, and then you can listen to it. There's text-to-braille devices. It's basically just going to be sort of like a USB keyboard, except this keyboard has these small little braille pieces, just these plastic pieces that can pop up, and then it'll form all these different braille words. And you just plug that into a computer. You put whatever you need highlighted or put into a program that would actually pop up those little plastic pieces, and then the student would be able to read the braille off of that. Then there's also handheld recorders, so if the student's more of an auditory type learner, they can definitely record a lecture. They can go back, they can go back and they can listen to what the teacher had to say. For the braille aspect of it, just a tiny bit of background on the braille. It's used regularly by 5,500 students in today's education for America. But of those 5,500 students, that is the only amount that would use braille out of the 93,600 students that are actually visually impaired. So there are a lot of those students that don't need to use braille, but the ones that don't use it, they can definitely, they could probably get a better service in the classroom if they were to use braille from it. And just some ways that braille is used in the classroom. There are braille typewriters. It's just like a regular typewriter that people would have, except instead of having it be the letter on there that's probably printed on, you have these small plastic pieces again on it that the reader would be able to feel. They'd realize that that's a letter or a number, and then it would punch out this little spot onto the paper, so that way they can actually feel the braille on that paper too. And like I said, there's also the text-to-braille devices. For physical devices, there's a physical device. Let me repeat that. For physical devices, it's basically going to be any sort of device that the student can hold or that will show something a lot easier for that student to look at. Just a few examples of this is that there's like magnifying glasses that the student can hold, so they can put it up to a book or they can put it up to their notes. That way they can see what they're putting down a lot easier. There's such a thing called adaptive paper, where it'll basically it's kind of like carbon paper, where it shows something a lot darker on that sheet. So it'd basically be, if you were to put your pencil on the paper, instead of it showing up in like an actual pencil for the gray, it would probably show up a lot darker. And then there's also, this was a fun fact I found for math classes, you can add in an abacus, which is just that handheld calculator that you can push things to the left and to the right. So along with that, there's also a video that I found for just some classroom tools.
We are also here at Truesdale Middle School, and we are showcasing our Braille Sense writers. This is new technology that's allowed our students to be more independent in the classroom.
It's a really nice device because it's easy to carry around, and it's way better than Braille writer.
Previously, either our teachers or our Braille writers would have had to transpose all the communication for our students that are Braille readers, and this allows them to be independent and not only read but also write Braille and produce documents that would have consumed notebooks and notebooks of pages.
They made it so where you could easily take it to class, and I believe they made it so you would be more independent, because that's where you have to, instead of telling the teachers to ink it and print, they would actually print it with this computer.
So like I said, that's just basically one of the text-to-braille readers that's out there. It will feature those little small plastic pieces that the student can feel around for, and then they can definitely feel for it in Braille. And those are just the sources that I have.